With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your look at conservation news from across the nation for the week of July 14th, 2025. This week, we'd like to thank Bass Pro Shops, Richard Childress Racing, and Hornady. Thank you so much for your support. This week's top story, back-to-back Sunday hunting victories open new opportunities for hunters on nearly 30 million acres. We're going to talk with Kaleigh Leager here in a moment, who was on the ground for the governor's signing ceremony in Pennsylvania. Here's what's in the One Big Beautiful Bill, what it means to sportsmen and women. Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation reappointed the Washington Budget and Policy Advisory Group. President Trump signs Make America Beautiful Again executive order. Crossbows fully included in the Minnesota archery season through 2026. And then we wrap things up. 2 wildlife habitat restoration projects in North Carolina move towards implementation. All that and so very much more. But let us welcome in now Assistant Manager in the Mid-Atlantic States, Kaleigh Leager, again, who was on the ground there in Pennsylvania. And I know last week we, in real time, we're celebrating what we're talking about here today in Pennsylvania, in Connecticut. We had Christian on at the very time, so we did cover Connecticut. And we weren't able to get you on. So here we are, Kaleigh. Really awesome job. I'm going to let you talk about everything that built up to this from last session. Well, we can go back damn near a decade and a half on this if we'd like, but describe to our folks, listening audience, what it was like there. Governor Josh Shapiro signing that into law, the flavor of the event, the energy that was there on the ground, and yeah. Speed us up.
All right, Fred. So, as you can imagine, it was a pretty uplifting place to be at the bill signing. There was a lot of folks there who've had this is their priority. Not as long as CSF for a lot of them, but there was a lot of folks there who were really excited, who had been working on this for a really long time. Members of the legislature who had been there for a very long time, who wanted to see this pass, and so it was a pretty exciting place to be. Governor Shapiro, when he rolled up, you could tell that he was excited to be a part of it as well, making history there in the Commonwealth. So, being able to be surrounded by hunters, by non-hunters, folks who just really wanted to get this seen through. Representative Steele was there, and she obviously was in great spirits. And then you had members of the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, the 2 co-chairs in the Senate, Senator Greg Rothman, and then Senator Malone, and then we also had co-chair from the House, Representative Eddie Dave Pashinsky. He was there as well, and everyone was just very excited to see it through. And then when Governor Shapiro was finally able to put ink to paper and sign it, it was almost a breath of relief, because we've come super close before, and it's just been it's been snatched away from us. So it was kind of like a big exhale as soon as he was able to sign that. So. It was a great time. It was a great time for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I know they were relieved as well and excited to see it through. And I know they're looking forward to getting that implemented here soon. So a great day for sportsmen and women for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you go back a handful of years ago to when they authorized the PGC to implement, gave them, if you will, 3 Sundays that they could work around and figure out, start taking steps. And then fast forward to last session where, we were there. We really were there. You and I and Cody from the PGC talked about that at NASC last year. And last week we had Director Smith and Cody on to join us right away on the heels. I think we were the first podcast, first show Director Smith got onto to celebrate with us. And, just kind of looking back at all that. And then, boom, here we are. Senator Laughlin there with Senate Bill 67 last session was close. And then the same name Senate bill teed this up. And then his counterpart there in the House uh, found a way to really drive that House bill forward. Same exact language, clean bill. That's what Director Smith and I kind of opined about, was that it was clean as opposed to last session when they muddied the waters, adding tag-ons to this and that, and the fact that both chambers had exact same language, clean bill, moved it forward all the way through the process to the governor is really how you like government to work all the time.
Yeah, it's it's just kind of a testament to once a legislature or body wants to get something done, how I don't want to say how easy it is, but how expedited it can actually be. And then you can kind of see when they, want to throw a wrench in something or politics are being played, how long it can take. And we saw last year, we were thinking that it was going to go through. It was kind of, the 11th hour. Is this going to pass? We're not sure. We're hearing it is. And then, it just kind of fell wayside to politics. But this year, they were able to come together, both sides realize that this wasn't a partisan issue. It's bipartisan through and through. And they were able to get it done. And like I said, once they get their mind to something and they want to move something, it can happen fairly quickly if the stars align. And they did this year, which I'm glad to. It feels good to have it under my belt, to have to look forward to focusing more on other things in the Commonwealth. I'm sure that there's, going to be a bunch of stuff teed up. This isn't just kind of okay, we're done. I can check not being involved in Pennsylvania anymore, but at least it won't be, necessarily on this topic. So hats off to everybody who helped to get to this point. Deep breath, sigh of relief.
Well, I think what's really promising too coming out of this is the reaction and the words of Governor Shapiro. He took time to have opening remarks and teed up the signing ceremony, and then after continued his line of thought and just really, coming out admitting, I'm not a hunter, but I appreciate this. I appreciate the longstanding tradition. I appreciate what the sportsmen and women of Pennsylvania contribute to funding, contribute to conservation, and he seemed to really understand what true conservation is. So often, we talk about politicians, wherever their seat is in the executive or administrative, whatever, they hear the word conservation that's been co-opted by preservationists and the anti crowd because they just don't know any better. Um, and so they think they're talking about one thing and they really mean another. In this case, it really seemed like Governor Shapiro gets it. So laying the groundwork for you and our in-state partners and the coalition you lead there with the work group to capitalize on that. So going forward, as sportsmen and women issues come up, as long as Governor Shapiro is sitting there in Harrisburg, you'd like to think that he's sympathetic to some of the things and to priority policy that favors our community, and will be on board. And hopefully, one day soon, hopefully very soon, we can look forward to adding Governor Shapiro perhaps to the Governor Sportsman's Council as he spoke so passionately about it. And I felt like it was really authentic, the words he was speaking in the presentation he gave.
Yeah, you have folks who can admit to say, okay, maybe I'm not a sportsman, I'm not a sportswoman. I don't, I don't personally have that connection to it, but they get a deep understanding of where it's rooted from, the heritage behind it, the importance it is to their constituency, their residents. And then specifically when they can recognize the important role that it plays and truly understand the impact that it has on conservation and that we're bearing the weight of it all, hunters and anglers, it's really great. And you could definitely tell Governor Shapiro, if he wasn't 100% familiar with the entire system before, that he had done his homework, and his staff made sure that he had a deep understanding of what it is that he was speaking about. And I thought that he did a really good job speaking to the issue at hand and what it meant to everybody. So, hats off to him, his staff, again, everyone that was involved. I think he has a really good relationship too with the PGC, and they were able to give him as much information as he needed. So, hats off to them for being able to provide that solid framework. So, again, just a really, really great time. I'm still kind of rolling off the high of it, so I'll hold on to it as long as I can.
Well, certainly Director Smith and his staff have the governor's ear working with that, but I would say that the 1-2 punch between PGC executive staff and their professional staff, as well as the Pennsylvania Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, championed by CSF. We work directly with them, our co-chairs. Your great work on the ground. I know you'll be humble about it, but I know you've been just a bulldog about it and really working close with those legislators and advancing this. So, all those things combined really, help. And that's what we do. We educate, we advocate to the lawmakers, to the policy people, and at all levels, and make sure they understand the true picture. And you did a really, really great job at that.
I appreciate it, Fred. Yep. Thank you.
Take us behind the scenes a little bit, if you would, in the remaining time. Again, harkening back to last year, kind of the challenges that were presented to you, and kind of your inside baseball. Pull the curtain back a little bit on some of the process.
Sure. So when I first started at CSF, I'm coming up actually on 2 years here very soon. One of the conversations that I had with our Vice President of Policy, Brent Miller, he was informing me that the first time, I believe it was the first time he said that he ever testified on behalf of CSF was in Harrisburg at a meeting, a hearing regarding Sunday hunting. And he said that was about almost 15 years ago this year. So that just stands to show that the tenure that CSF has had, and we've been a part of the conversation, as you mentioned earlier, for almost a decade and a half. And so he truly laid the groundwork for CSF, and then it took my predecessor and the folks that came before him just to keep harking and hammering on the folks there of the importance of this. And as I mentioned last year, it was kind of I believe that the reason it has taken this long to pass truly is just politics. One party being able to hold it over the other, a tit for tat kind of situation. We want to see this in it to get it passed. We don't want to see this in it to get it passed. And then things are added to it. And then, okay, that's not good enough or that's too much. As we heard, some of the opponents of this were saying, we just want a clean bill. Last year, there was a lot of provisions in it that didn't necessarily have to do with Sunday hunting. And that was the biggest issue last year was, okay, why don't we just have a clean Sunday hunting bill? Let's just repeal the language in code that is prohibiting this legislatively, and let's move forward. Well, there were some interested parties and everything that wanted to see certain things go through to lend their support. And it just kind of muddied the waters a little bit.
Mhm.
And then this year it was Senate Bill 67. It was pretty much the same thing as last year. There were some additions to the legislation that did not have to do with just particularly Sunday hunting. And there was a copy of that bill in the House, a little bit different verbatim. Representative Mandy Steele, I guess through conversations and just realizing this is a priority. It doesn't matter who gets it passed. We just need to get it passed. Representative Steele went through and made some language there to match the Senate bill version, a cleaner Senate bill version that basically just had Sunday hunting in it. There was still one provision, I believe, about trespassing, strengthening the restrictions, or excuse me, the penalties for trespassing. And so that was in there, but that's about as clean as it was going to get. And then I think that kind of led us to where everybody felt comfortable with where it was at. And again, they kind of the same situation down here in Maryland. Everyone's kind of tired of hearing about it. The legislature recognizes that it belongs in the hands of the regulatory process through the state agency, the wildlife management experts. And again, it was an accumulation of multiple things that kind of put the weight there on the bridge, and it finally broke, and the levee let the water through. So here we are today. Again, things sometimes are victims of politics, and it was a very long battle with politics. And I'm sure, before myself, that I don't have the tenure with the entirety of this argument of trying to get this passed, but I'm sure there were some other things involved there, but from what I can tell in the conversations that I've had for folks who have been, in this before myself, it seemed to have been politics.
Yeah. Well, we're clear of it. It is law, and as of this coming fall, folks visiting and obviously residents of Pennsylvania will get to enjoy their Sunday hunting. Now, we noted nothing changed for the waterfowlers. Seemed like a lot of the in-state residents wanted to keep it the same way as far as how the compensatory days were stretched out later in the season. I know I'm not a waterfowler, but I understand you crazy waterfowlers have your own philosophy on it. So whatever, people are happy. They're going to get the way they want. And everyone, that chooses to go out on Sunday gets to go out and do it. So outstanding work and just an overall congratulations to all involved and the license holders, the hunters of Pennsylvania.
Absolutely, yeah, and again, it's important to note, it's not forcing you to go out to hunt on Sunday, it's just like anything else that you can or can't do on Sunday. If you don't wanna watch football, or you don't wanna go to a bar, or you don't wanna do something on Sunday, you have the freedom not to, and it's the same thing with Sunday hunting. The only difference is now you have the freedom to go out on a Sunday, so,
That's exactly
uh,
right.
kudos to everybody, and, kudos to Governor Shapiro for recognizing that as well. That was in his speech, adding a freedom there for folks in the Commonwealth.
Yep, no doubt, no doubt. Kaylee, we'll leave it there. Congratulations again on your hard work and seeing it through, and we'll definitely catch up here in the near future.
Alright, thanks, Fred, take care.
You bet. All right, man. Thanks to Kaylee for her time covering the good news there in Pennsylvania, and as referenced, go back last week and hear from Christian for all the good that was done there on the ground in Connecticut. I know I think we got a signing ceremony coming up with Governor Lamont. So if and when that happens, we'll bring that to you. Then I invite you to go back to last Thursday's feature episode, as referenced, Director Smith out of PGC and Commissioner Dixon there in Connecticut, both talking about the benefits, the excitement, some administrative stuff there. When folks can expect those seasons, that Sunday hunting to kick in, and do your due diligence before heading out into the wilds of Connecticut and Pennsylvania. If you're a traveling hunter, and if you're in state, obviously be up on the rules there when those seasons start. So again, big congratulations. The high is still there. People are still very excited, still very fresh, and just glad we're able to bring this to you a couple weeks in a row and hear from Kaylee there on the ground. Before we move on, as always, we ask that you follow, like, subscribe wherever you can. Follow us on your preferred platform. Looks like most of you are listening to us on Apple, iTunes there, and Spotify. Some folks there on iHeart as well. All great platforms. You can follow and subscribe on all three. And I know for sure on Apple and Spotify, you can do a 5-star rating. So if you would please do so. It helps us become more discoverable to folks not in this audience, and hopefully we get some more folks tuning in. We appreciate it. All right, let's continue with the news. Again, as referenced last week, we're doing a little catch up. So much, it's a super busy news cycle. I had teased out that we are going to do a special drop feature for this Thursday, but our very own Taylor Schmitz very well can put together an article for this week's TSV. So we're going to forego that, as I don't want to be redundant. This article here covers exactly what we're going to do, and that is what's in the one big beautiful bill and what it means to sportsmen and women. Taylor reports nearly 2 weeks ago, Congress passed and the president signed the one big beautiful bill. Included in that legislation are a number of provisions that will have a direct impact on sportsmen and women, fish, and wildlife in our nation's lands and waters. Notably absent from the BBB was language to mandate the disposal of certain federal public lands, which CSF worked hard to defeat. We covered that extensively, brought you the press releases, our position on it. If you go to the article, you can click the in article link and bring you back to some of that coverage. On July 4th, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the comprehensive bill that has been the focus of Congress since the beginning of the 119th, in January was signed into law. While this legislation is a large and all-encompassing act, there are a few particular provisions of note that will impact sportsmen and women across the country. Importantly, the Triple B omitted the mandate to sell off certain federal public lands across 11 Western states, which was strongly opposed and was a big effort by CSF. While there were a number of proposals to sell off public lands that were considered Throughout the process of developing the Big Beautiful Bill, CSF strongly opposed the consideration of any public land disposal through this process. As a result of CSF's efforts, the language to mandate the sale of certain public lands was ultimately removed from the final bill that became law. The Triple B also included a provision to reduce the $200 National Firearms Act Form 4 tax stamp to $0 for the purchase of a firearm suppressor and certain types of firearms. I think referencing the short barrel there. Prior to enactment of the Triple B, each time the individual purchased a suppressor, they needed to pay a one-time $200 tax stamp. Under the new law, individuals are no longer be subject to that $200 tax stamp each time they purchase a suppressor, but they must still file the requisite paperwork and undergo the attendant background check. Additionally, several of the Farm Bill's conservation programs and previous investments made through the Reduction Act in 2022 are now officially considered to be a part of the Farm Bill's baseline. This means that current funding levels will serve as the base once Congress begins the hard work of writing the next iteration of the Farm Bill. Likewise, the Triple B language for these programs remove many of the climate limitations that, as pointed out by many within the sporting conservation community, failed to include many key practices that benefit wildlife habitat and mitigate impacts commonly attributed to climate change. This bill also included $105 million to continue the successful feral swine eradication and control program. And most important to hunters and anglers, included $70 million for the voluntary public access habitat incentive program, which provides financial incentives to private landowners to voluntarily open their properties to public hunting access in many states. Further, the bill includes significant forest management provisions to support the long term sustainability of U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management lands by improving forest resilience to wildfire and other threats through increased timber sales. Specifically, the reconciliation bill directs the U.S. Forest Service to increase the volume of timber sold over the next 10 fiscal years by a minimum of 250 million board feet annually, more than the prior fiscal year, and directs the BLM to increase the volume of timber sold over the same period by a minimum of 20 million board feet annually, more than the previous fiscal year. Additionally, the Triple B aims to provide stability by requiring the U.S. Forest Service to enter a minimum of 40 20-year timber sale contracts and requiring the BLM to enter at least 5 20-year timber sale contracts. The mandated and incrementally increasing timber sales align with Executive Order 14225, immediate expansion of timber production, Secretary's Memorandum 1078-006, increasing timber production and designating an emergency situation on National Forest System lands, and the U.S. Forest Service new National Active Forest Management Strategy. After 2.5 decades of relatively stagnant federal timber sales that resulted in overstocked, unproductive forests for wildlife, the increased timber harvest will improve habitat diversity and increase forest resiliency to support fish, wildlife habitat, and access for hunters, anglers. A bit more than a mouthful there. Again, to recap, land disposal gone. That was the big news, huge news. Ironically, or not, more apropos for me, I was actually enjoying public lands in Utah when that news broke, and my a little bit of phone signal I had came across my phone, and I was like, "Hey, Isn't that something? So that was the big news that come out of it. But as reported here, um, farm bill funding and a big one too that is I think some people are overlooking is the $200 stamp fee uh, from the National Firearms Act that is gone. So if you thought suppressors were tough to come by because you had to pay for the suppressor itself and then another $200 uh, tax on top of that, um, these should be a little bit easier to come by as far as a financial commitment and will improve your shooting experience no matter what you're doing. If you're doing it recreationally, um, at a range, you're hunting, it's a big improvement in quality of hunt, quality of experience on the range. So hopefully that cost prohibitive $200 being removed will help a lot of folks get those hearing protection devices in place and make them more accessible. And then obviously, as we ended there, a whole lot of provisions for improving forest management and timber sales there. That's gone, that has gone overlooked as well. Okay, moving on. Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation reappointed to Washington Budget and Policy Advisory Group. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's Budget and Policy Advisory Group plays a critical role in shaping sustainable wildlife management and funding strategies. CSF continued representation through Assistant Manager Northwestern States Marie Newmiller's reappointment ensures that the sportsman's voice remains central to these discussions. This position strengthens advocacy for science based conservation and access for hunters, anglers, and trappers. Established in 2017 to address the looming budget deficit, the Budget and Policy Advisory Group has been instrumental in collaborating with the state agency through fiscal changes and policy directions. With budget cuts across the board looming in Washington state, collaboration with stakeholders will be vital as the department navigates hatchery closures, layoffs, and other adjustments brought by the 2025 legislative budget. Through Marie's reappointment, CSF continues to champion the American system of conservation funding, ensuring sportsmen's contributions, such as license fees, are utilized to sustain science based wildlife management and to continue providing opportunities for hunting, fishing, trapping, and shooting sports. As the 2023-2025 membership terms expired this past June, the state agency there in Washington began recruitment for the 2025 through 2027 advisory group. On July 2nd of this year, our very own Marie Newmiller was reappointed to the agency group to represent CSF. CSF's continued presence on the group reinforces the importance of the North American model of wildlife management and the conservation funding mechanism previously referenced. Um, Both of those relying on sportsmen's contributions through license fees, excise taxes to fund Washington State Agency critical fish and wildlife management programs. Marie will continue to provide input on future budget planning, long term funding strategies, and future legislative policy requests for the state agency. Despite the current fiscal constraints impacting Washington's the agency's overall operation, Marie's advocacy will focus on equitable solutions that balance conservation with the needs of Washington's sportsman community, drawing from CSF's track record of upholding and supporting the American system of conservation funding by collaborating with coalition partners. New Miller aims to secure stable long term funding and to protect outdoor traditions. CSF encourages sportsmen and women to play an active role in Washington's public process and will be sharing information on how to engage as the 2026 legislative policy package takes shape. Way to go, Marie! Way to lead from the front there, getting involved, and uh, they don't really come better than Marie. Extremely talented, smart, and just really up on her stuff there, and a great asset to not only to us but the state agency there being part of that group. All right, another one from the Hill here. President Trump signs "Make America Beautiful Again" executive order. This also from Taylor Schmitz. The "Make America Beautiful Again" represents a critical commitment to America's sportsmen and women and our nation's conservation efforts. Many of the objectives contained in President Trump's EO are aligned with the longstanding guiding principles of CSF, and this EO will help serve as a springboard to bolster access for sportsmen and women and deliver on the ground conservation for our nation's fish and wildlife. Among several important directives in the executive order is the specific mention of increasing access for hunting and fishing and improving voluntary conservation efforts across the country. CSF thanks President Trump for signing this executive order and for recognizing the important value that hunters and anglers play in conservation. This all took place on July 3rd. Again, as President Trump signed that executive order with the goal of improving conservation across the country and bolstering that access for our time honored traditions of hunting and fishing. The executive order draws renewed attention and support for conservation and access while providing for a call to action to deliver on the ground programming that will benefit the sporting conservation community. Many of the priorities contained in the executive order are well aligned with the time honored conservation ethos that hunters, anglers, and other sportsmen and women pride themselves in. Specifically, the order provides important directives to promote responsible stewardship and natural resources while driving economic growth, expand access to public lands and waters for recreation, hunting, and fishing, encourage responsible voluntary conservation efforts, cut bureaucracy delays that hinder effective environmental management, and recover America's fish and wildlife populations through proactive, voluntary, on the ground collaborative conservation efforts. To accomplish the objectives contained within the executive order, a commission consisting of key members of the president's cabinet and senior White House staff will be organized to implement and deliver on these important goals. The executive order is a welcome opportunity to deliver meaningful wins for sportsmen and women across the country, and CSF looks forward to working with the Make America Beautiful Again Commission to make the objectives contained in the order a reality. I'll look forward to future reporting on that and hopefully achieving many, if not all, of those goals. Let's go to Minnesota. This is from Bob Matthews. Crossbows fully included in the 2026 archery season there in Minnesota. Minnesota Senate File number 3, the Omnibus Environment and Natural Resources Appropriations Bill was passed in early June. The bill extended the sunset for crossbows to be included during archery season, which was first legislatively authorized in 2023. CSF worked in both 2023 and 2025 to support full inclusion of crossbows and will continue to support in the future to remove the sunset entirely. Going back to 2023, Minnesota State Legislature allowed the full inclusion of crossbows to take game species during those species' respective archery seasons, but with a sunset date of 2025. Earlier this session, Minnesota Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Representative Josh Heinzman introduced House File 1531, which would have removed the sunset entirely, ultimately passed as provision Senate File 3. The sunset date was extended to 2026. CSF worked with legislators to support the passage of full crossbow inclusion in both 23 and 25, as crossbows benefit the sporting conservation community by providing aging archery hunters the opportunity to continue to pursue their favorite species, as a sharp decrease in archery hunters occurs as hunters grow older. Crossbows also provide hunters that have experienced either long or short term injuries with the opportunity to continue participating in archery season as they would have and serve as an introduction to new methods of take that make archery season more accessible to hunters that have only ever hunted with a firearm. Although fully incorporating crossbows into Minnesota's archery season without the sunset date will need to be revisited next session, the omnibus extension will allow hunters of the North Star State to continue exploring the opportunities that horizontal archery offers. CSF will continue to support legislation to expand opportunities for sportsmen and women around the country through the strong network of sportsmen legislators that comprise the National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucus. Yeah, every victory counts here, incrementally or however you're getting there, but ideally we're getting to that full inclusion, remove those sunsets. Uh, we did it here in New Hampshire a number of years ago, and things are working out pretty good. Our especially when they initially rolled it out in two specific wildlife management areas that were just overpopulated with deer. Um, those targets are still over management level, and despite adding crossbows to that, still managing deer, but they're not anywhere near where they want to be. So I guess I'm saying that to say uh, there's not this new army of crossbow hunters out there just stacking bodies as some hyperbole out there around crossbows would lead you to believe. Ranges are still the same as up and down tackle. Um, these things are heavier too. Like today's modern up and down, pretty light stuff. I mean, I've got one and I carry it around. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cumbersome. And even some of your smaller variants are still not as light as your up and down stuff. So I ain't whatever. Whatever your choice of method is, God bless you. Go out there and do it. And hopefully Minnesota, instead of kicking the can, you guys will be able to make this happen for full for full inclusion in 2026 and never have to think about this again. And just keep that as an option for folks. All right, let's wrap it up. Two wildlife habitat restoration projects in North Carolina move towards implementation. This from John Colclaser. After a decade of public input and planning to revise the land management plan for the Natala and Pisgah National Forests, as well as years of planning for these individual habitat improvement projects, CSF is encouraged to see the national forests in North Carolina lean into agency-wide goals to significantly increase timber harvest, which will create the desired habitat conditions that will pay dividends for wildlife and the sportsmen and women that depend on federal forests for recreational access. Young forests and other early habitats are critical for many species of wildlife, game, non-game, yet national forests across the country, including the two mentioned in the intro, regularly fail to meet early successional habitat goals for a number of reasons: policy implementations, litigation, capacity, and so on. The silviculture treatments proposed in the two projects will support declining wildlife species like the ruffed grouse and golden winged warbler, as well as numerous species of greatest conservation need identified in the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan. CSF strongly supports actively managing public lands to improve forest health and wildlife habitat to enhance hunter angler access. In June, U.S. Forest Service released the draft decision notice for the crossover project on the Nantala National Forest in Cherokee and Graham counties of North Carolina. The project proposes to move forward with the Alternative B modified action, which would improve habitat diversity, including creating young forests through regeneration, harvest, timber stand improvement treatments, and prescribed burns. The project would also rehabilitate wildlife openings and restore watershed health. After receiving pushback from environmental groups, the proposed action dropped 3 stands and modified harvest in 3 other stands. The 45-day objection period commenced on June 25th. On July 7th, U.S. Forest Service issued a final decision for the Mountains project on the Nantala National Forest in Macon County, North Carolina. Initiated in 2021 after consolidating 2 previously started projects, the project will move toward implementation absent litigation after 3 rounds of public input, including working through the objection resolution process. District Ranger Troy Waskey selected the Alternative B modified action alternative, which will help achieve the desired condition for the management areas laid out in the forest plan for the Nantala and Pisgah National Forests by creating roughly 400 acres of young forest. Currently, young forests comprise of roughly 0.7% of the project area, while approximately 80% is older than 80 years old. The Alternative B modified action alternative will help restore forest age class and structural diversity in several forest cover types, support mass producing species, and increase the amount of regenerating young forests through various silviculture treatments. Additionally, 2 new wildlife fields will be created, other wildlife openings will be enhanced, and stream connectivity will be improved habitat for brook trout and other species. While the North Carolina sportsman's community wanted more timber harvested, the project will harvest timber on less than 2% of the almost 25,000-acre project area to move the area even more towards the young forest desired conditions based on the natural range of variation model in the forest plan. The project is still a positive step forward for habitat improvement. CSF is thankful for the leadership of the U.S. Forest Service to implement the goals of the forest plan despite opposition from environmental groups to address forest health issues and improve habitat for fish and wildlife. There you go. That's the news for this week. Longer program. We had a lot to celebrate up front, so thanks for sticking with us. Um, some housekeeping here. As always, go to congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org. Sign up for the free TSV newsletter. As I always say every week, everything I'm saying, you can go to the articles, go to the in-article links, dive deeper, do your own homework, connect you to some research, become more educated on these topics, especially if you are in the state capitol and you are casting votes upon and for your constituency on these items. Legislators in the legislature can become more informed, and you should. And always, you can reach out to us here at CSF if you have questions that we can better uh, advise and educate. And that's what we stand to do here. So there, sign up for the TSV. It is free. Sign up for Tracking the Capitals. That is also free. And for the legislators, you've all been looking forward to this. Our NASC early bird registration is now open. So go to the website, click on the NASC link. There you can get that early bird access, price reduction. See us in Memphis this December. It's going to be a time. Outdoor activities are listed. Last year, I think we sold out of almost all of them, if not all of them, in Louisiana. So I recommend getting on it, securing your spot for those outdoor activities. Got some great stuff lined up for you. Like I said, we're going to be there in Memphis. Graceland, Elvis, all that stuff, and so much more, and some great outdoor experiences, and the lineup of speakers and agenda is just is going to be as good as it always is, and maybe even better. So we had a time last year, like I said, in Louisiana. Looking forward to a great time, as this is being co-sponsored and co-hosted by Tennessee and Mississippi legislative sportsmen's caucuses. So a lot of energy and love being put into this. So all there on the website, congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org. That's it for this week's show. As always, CSF is your inside connection, outdoor legislation. We'll see you next week. So long. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.